It was nearly midnight when the vast mansion fell into silence, its golden chandeliers dimmed, the soft ticking of antique clocks the only sound left in the hallways. To most, the place radiated perfection, marble floors polished like mirrors, walls adorned with priceless art, a garden that looked like something out of a royal palace. But behind the beauty, in a quiet corner of the house where the servants stayed, something entirely different was unfolding. A soft sob echoed through the darkness, fragile and trembling. It belonged to Maria, the maid who had worked in the millionaire's mansion for years. She was usually the one who carried a smile no matter how hard the day had been, the one who never complained about the weight of her tasks. But tonight, her strength gave way. She sat on the edge of her small bed, her face buried in her hands, muffling her cries so no one would hear. Or so she thought. Upstairs, Edward Hale, the millionaire who owned the mansion, couldn't sleep. Despite his wealth, his nights were often restless, haunted by memories of a past he rarely spoke of. He decided to step out into the hallway to breathe in some quiet, but as he passed the servants' quarters, he froze. From behind one of the thin wooden doors, he heard the unmistakable sound of someone crying. Edward hesitated. A man like him wasn't expected to pry into the lives of those who worked for him. Servants came and went, their struggles rarely his concern. But something about that sound pierced him. It wasn't just crying, it was the kind of cry that comes from a place of deep sorrow, the kind one doesn't easily recover from. Against his usual instincts, he knocked gently on the door. The crying stopped. Then came a startled voice, trembling. "Who's there?" "It's me," Edward sighed softly. "Mr. Hale." There was silence, then hurried shuffling. Maria opened the door, quickly wiping her eyes, trying to mask the evidence of her pain. I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. "I didn't mean to disturb you." Edward looked at her closely. The dim light revealed her red, swollen eyes, the quiver of her lips as she forced a weak smile. Something inside him stirred. This was not the composed, cheerful maid he saw each morning. "Maria," he said gently, "you weren't disturbing me. But, why are you crying at this hour?" She lowered her gaze, twisting the edge of her apron nervously. "It's nothing, sir. Please don't worry." But Edward didn't move. His silence pressed her, and finally, with a trembling voice, she confessed. "My son, he's sick. Very sick. The doctors say he needs a surgery, but," her voice broke. "I can't afford it. I send every penny I earn here back home, but it's still not enough. Tonight I found out, if I don't arrange the money soon, I might lose him." Her words hung heavy in the air. For Edward, it was as if a cold hand gripped his heart. He had built his empire from nothing, had known hunger and desperation once himself, before fortune found him. But he had long buried that memory beneath layers of wealth and power. Now, looking at Maria's tears, those memories clawed their way back. "How much do you need?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. She shook her head quickly, panicked. "No, sir, I didn't mean to ask for help. I just needed to let it out. You've already done so much giving me this job. I can't ask for more." Edward stepped into the room, lowering his tone. "Maria, tell me, how much?" Her hands trembled as she whispered the amount. To her, it was enormous, an impossible mountain she could never climb. But to Edward, it was less than what he spent on a single dinner with his business associates. Yet the weight of her words was far greater than any number could express. Without a word, Edward pulled out his phone, made a call, and arranged the transfer to the hospital in her hometown. Maria stood frozen, watching in disbelief. When he ended the call, he looked at her with eyes softer than she had ever seen. "Your son will get his surgery. Don't worry anymore." Maria's knees buckled, and she collapsed into sobs, this time of gratitude. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you. You've saved his life." Edward placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No, Maria. You reminded me of something I had forgotten, that all the wealth in the world means nothing if it can't be used to save a life." The next morning, the household buzzed with whispers. Everyone had heard of the millionaire's late-night act of generosity. But Edward didn't stop there. Quietly, he arranged for Maria's son not only to receive treatment but also to be enrolled in one of the best schools, with all expenses covered. He set up a small fund in Maria's name, ensuring she would never have to worry about her family's survival again. Weeks later, Maria's son recovered, and Edward flew her to visit him. The reunion between mother and child melted even the coldest hearts. Edward, standing a few steps away, watched with tears in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt a warmth that money alone had never given him. News of his kindness spread beyond the walls of his mansion. People spoke not of his wealth or his empire but of his heart. And Edward, once a man defined by numbers and profits, found himself defined by something greater, compassion. But the story didn't end there. On a quiet evening, months later, Maria approached Edward once more, holding a simple handmade card from her son. On it, in shaky letters, the boy had written, "Thank you for giving me back my mom's smile." Edward held the card in his hands, unable to speak. In that moment, he realized he hadn't just saved a life, he had saved a family, restored hope, and rediscovered his own humanity. That night, as Edward looked out over his mansion, the chandeliers sparkling, he thought about how he once believed success was about how much you could accumulate. But now he knew the truth. Success was about how much light you could bring into someone else's darkness. And so, the millionaire who once walked past tears without noticing became the man remembered not for his fortune but for his kindness. Because in the end, it wasn't the mansion, the cars, or the wealth that left everyone in tears. It was the simple act of a man choosing to care. And that, above all, was his greatest legacy.